Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Ah,
Now, if you're a UPSC aspirant burning the midnight oil, this one's for you. We're diving into a topic that's practically a guaranteed appearance in your mains exam, and maybe even prelims MSMEs. You know, those micro, small, and medium enterprises that are the backbone of the Indian economy.
they really are, and there's so much to unpack beyond just their sheer size.
Right.
The Indian Express just ran a fantastic editorial on them,
Yeah.
and it highlights how MSMEs are like India's economic engine, but one that needs constant fine-tuning. We'll be exploring both the incredible contributions they make, but also the really tough challenges they're up against.
All right, so let's start with the powerhouse stats. I mean, I knew MSMEs were important, but I was blown away by some of the numbers.
Hmm.
For example, did you know they're responsible for nearly half of India's total manufacturing output?
It's true.
Wow.
And if you're thinking about the UPSC, these numbers are gold.
Oh,
We're talking about over 1 crore registered MSMEs employing a massive 7.5 crore people.
wow.
That's more than the entire population of many countries.
Well-
This workforce is vital to India's economic resilience, especially in rural areas where they prevent mass migration to cities.
Okay, so we're talking about huge numbers of jobs, which has a ripple effect on social stability and development. What about their contribution to the overall economy? I know they're a big part of GDP, right?
Absolutely. MSMEs contribute roughly 30% to India's total GDP and a whopping 45% of its manufacturing output. Think about that. Nearly half of everything India makes comes from these often smaller, localized businesses.
That's incredible. And I bet they play a big role in exports too, especially as India aims to become a global manufacturing hub.
You're absolutely right. Nearly 46% of India's total exports come from MSMEs. This is huge for a few reasons. First, it diversifies India's export basket beyond the traditional heavy hitters like IT and textiles. Second, it brings opportunities and income to rural communities, which helps bridge the urban-rural divide. This kind of insight is what UPSC examiners love to see.
It's all starting to connect now.
Yeah.
You've got the economic impact, the social angle, the development perspective.
No.
No wonder MSMEs are such a hot topic for the UPSC.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is the shift we're seeing towards digitalization in the MSME sector. A recent study found that a whopping 72% of their transactions are now digital.
Wait, 72%? That's way higher than I expected.
It is, and it signals a potential turning point. We're seeing the rise of fintech solutions that are making it easier for MSMEs to access credit, manage their finances, and even connect with new markets. The government is also pushing this digital transformation with initiatives like the Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC. Think of it as a more inclusive, decentralized alternative to the big e-commerce giants. It's designed to level the playing field and give MSMEs greater access to the digital marketplace.
I'm starting to see why this is such a crucial topic. It touches upon so many key themes that UPSC examiners love. Economic growth, digital transformation, social development, even India's global aspirations. But I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Okay, so we've painted this picture of MSMEs as a driving force in the Indian economy, but I know there are some serious roadblocks they're facing too. What's the biggest challenge they're up against?
One of the most significant hurdles, and this comes up repeatedly in UPSC discussions, is access to credit. Despite all the government schemes and the rise of fintech, a shockingly low number of MSMEs, only about 20% according to Crystal, have access to formal credit.
Wait, only 20%? That's a major bottleneck. Why are so many MSMEs being left out of the formal credit system? Is it just a lack of awareness about available options?
It's more complicated than that. You have to remember that many MSMEs lack the kind of collateral that traditional banks require. Then there are the risk-averse lending policies and bureaucratic hurdles that can make the whole process incredibly daunting. And yes, a lack of awareness about schemes and options certainly doesn't help.
And to make things even tougher, there's the issue of delayed payments from larger companies and even government departments, right? The Indian Express mentioned a whopping 10.7 lakh crore outstanding to MSMEs. Imagine the impact that has on their cash flow.
Absolutely. It's a crippling problem. Imagine running a small business and having to wait months to get paid for work you've already done. It makes it impossible to invest, expand, or even meet basic operating expenses. This delay creates a vicious cycle, pushing many MSMEs towards informal sources of credit, which often come with exorbitant interest rates.
So we've got this credit crunch that's holding them back.
Mm-hmm.
What other challenges are hindering MSME growth? I'm guessing the regulatory burden is a big one, especially for smaller businesses with limited resources.
You're spot on. The regulatory maze is a major headache for MSMEs. The Economic Survey has repeatedly called for streamlining regulations. They often face a complex web of procedures, licenses, and compliance requirements, all of which take time and money away from their core business.
It's like they're being asked to navigate a bureaucratic obstacle course while trying to run a business. But what about the skills and technology gap? We talked about the shift toward digitalization, but is everyone on board? Are MSMEs equipped to thrive in this new landscape?
That's another critical challenge. While the government is pushing for a digital India, many MSMEs are struggling to keep up. They lack the skilled workforce and technical know-how to fully embrace digitalization. For instance, only 6% of MSMEs use e-commerce for sales. That's a tiny fraction, and it shows the huge gap that exists in terms of digital literacy and adoption.
It's like having a high-speed train, but not enough people who know how to drive it. What kind of support do they need to bridge this gap?
It's multifaceted. We need to invest in upskilling and reskilling programs tailored to the specific needs of the MSME sector. This could involve digital literacy training, e-commerce management, or even specialized courses in areas like cybersecurity. And we need to make sure these programs are accessible and affordable, especially for MSMEs in rural areas.
So it's about empowering them with the skills and knowledge to leverage technology effectively. Are there any other major hurdles we haven't discussed yet?
There are a couple more, and they tie into broader themes that are likely to come up in your UPSC exams. One is infrastructure. Many MSMEs, especially those outside major cities, face chronic problems like unreliable power supply, poor road connectivity, and inefficient logistics. This adds to their costs, reduces their competitiveness, and limits their growth potential.
It's a classic example of how infrastructure bottlenecks can exacerbate existing inequalities and hinder development, especially in rural areas. And of course, we can't forget about the increasing pressure of global competition.
Exactly. MSMEs are now competing not just with domestic players, but with businesses from all over the world. The Indian Express article highlighted how something like Europe's carbon border adjustment mechanism, essentially a carbon tax, can put additional pressure on Indian MSMEs to adopt cleaner, more sustainable practices, which can be costly in the short term.
That's a great example of how global trends and policies can have a direct impact on MSMEs back home. It's like they're playing on an increasingly complex and interconnected chessboard. But there's one more challenge we need to address. The Indian Express mentioned the formalization hurdle. Can you explain what that means?
Absolutely. A significant portion of MSMEs in India operate in the informal sector. This means they're unregistered and often lack access to institutional support, formal credit, social security benefits for their workers, and even basic legal protections. They're essentially operating outside the formal economy, which makes them vulnerable to exploitation and limits their growth prospects.
It's a tricky situation. They need to formalize to access benefits, but the process itself can be daunting. And the benefits aren't always clear, especially if they've been operating informally for years.
Precisely. And this is where policy interventions become crucial. We need to make the formalization process easier, more transparent, and less burdensome. At the same time, we need to create incentives that make it attractive for MSMEs to join the formal economy. This could involve tax breaks, access to government schemes, and simplified compliance requirements.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, and honestly, it's a bit overwhelming to see all the challenges MSMEs are facing. But I'm hopeful that there are solutions out there. The Indian Express article, along with that standing committee report, seem to offer some concrete recommendations. Where do we even begin to tackle these issues?
Well, the good news is that policymakers are actively discussing solutions. And if you're prepping for the UPSC, understanding these potential solutions is key. For example, let's go back to the credit access problem.
Yeah.
Fintech is emerging as a real game changer here.
Right. The report talked about leveraging digital platforms like Ujjan and Aadhaar to streamline loan approvals.
Yeah.
It even suggested moving towards cash flow-based lending. So instead of requiring traditional collateral, which many MSMEs lack, lenders could assess creditworthiness based on the actual cash flow of the business.
Right.
That seems way more realistic for smaller businesses.
It is. It's about recognizing that MSMEs operate differently than large corporations. And the report also mentioned this idea of an account aggregator framework. It would create a secure digital locker for financial records, making it easier for MSMEs to share their financial data with lenders and access credit.
That would cut down on so much paperwork and hassle.
Yeah.
And remember that proposal for a via-par credit card scheme? It sounded like a version of the Cash-on credit card, but specifically designed for MSMEs.
Yes, providing them with easy access to short-term working capital loans could be a huge help, especially for managing those unpredictable cash flow gaps. But addressing the credit crunch is just one piece of the puzzle. What about those stifling regulations?
The report had some interesting ideas there too, like implementing a single window clearance system for all those licenses and permits MSMEs need.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how much time and energy that would save?
It would be a huge relief for them. And the report also suggested strengthening their RAMP scheme, which is designed to make it easier for businesses to comply with regulations. It's all about reducing those administrative burdens so they can focus on what they do best running their businesses.
So we're streamlining regulations, making credit more accessible. And what about that skills and tech gap? How do we get more MSMEs on board with digitalization?
Well, expanding initiatives like Skill India and the PM Vishwakarma scheme, but with a laser focus on the digital needs of MSMEs is a great start. We need targeted training programs that teach everything from basic digital literacy to advanced e-commerce strategies.
And integrating the UGM and ONDC platforms would make it much easier for them to join the e-commerce revolution.
Right.
It's all about creating a smoother, more supportive ecosystem.
Exactly. And we can't forget about addressing those infrastructure bottlenecks that disproportionately impact MSMEs. Investing in reliable power supply, improving road connectivity, and streamlining logistics are all critical for creating a level playing field.
And in today's globalized world, promoting sustainable practices and helping MSMEs adapt to things like the carbon border adjustment mechanism is essential.
Yeah.
We need to make sure they're not left behind as the world shifts toward greener technologies and policies.
Absolutely. And finally, we have to make formalization more appealing. We need to simplify the process, incentivize registration, and highlight the benefits that come with joining the formal economy.
So it's clear that reviving this economic engine requires a multi-pronged approach. We need policy reforms, technological advancements, targeted support, and a whole lot of collaboration. But most importantly, for all you future policymakers out there, it requires a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing MSMEs.
Precisely. And that's why this deep dive has been so crucial. We've gone beyond the headlines and really explored the nuances of this vital sector. This is the kind of in-depth analysis that will give you an edge in your UPSC exams, whether you're writing an essay on economic development or facing a tough interview question.
So, to all our listeners, keep these insights in mind as you continue your UPSC journey. And remember, this was just a glimpse into the world of MSMEs. There's so much more to explore. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What solutions resonate with you most? Head over to the comment section and let us know. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the episode with your fellow UPSC aspirants. And for those of you looking for more in-depth analysis, be sure to check out the original Indian Express article. We'll have a link for you in the show notes. Until next time, happy studying.